cosmic star bits. Something that's been highly requested for a long time is me doing an ASMR bedtime story for all of you. This has been a very long time coming, and I'm going to do my absolute best to whisper the best I can here and tell you all a wonderful little bedtime story. For those of you who haven't heard of this being a requested feature, it was back a long time ago that I read y'all the first chapter of Terry Pratchett's The Colour of Magic. And on top of that, people have wanted me to do ASMR of my voice for a long while. So, this series was born. It has taken me a while to get to it. I am sorry about that. And I'm doing my very best to get this out now that I have a little more free time. It'll be going up mainly on YouTube. And I'll be trying to make it a semi-regular thing. Doing a chapter each video. The first book we're going to start with is a book series that I absolutely adore and love, and that is the Knife series of books by R.J.Anderson. For those of you unfamiliar, allow me to read you the blurb on the back of the first book. Also, please do excuse me for the dragging on this. I do not have the best setup to both read a book and have my face tracking going at the same time, but I'm going to do my best. So, no ordinary fairy tale. Knife woke in a cold sweat, the torn edge of her wings sizzling with pain. How long had she been laying unconscious? Her worst fear had come to pass. She was trapped, flightless, a prisoner. The humans had put her in a box, and now they had come to torment her. So, a fairly interesting story. So, my little cosmic bits, let's begin. Chapter 1. I only want to go outside for a little while. The fairy child pleaded. Just below the window on the branch. I won't fly away. I won't tell anyone, I promise. Oh, Barony, you know you can't. Wing's voice came from the other side of the sewing table, muffled by a mouthful of pins. Her red hair had come free of its knot, falling in the bedraggled ringlets, and her cheeks were pink with the room's opposite oppressive heat. None of us can. It isn't safe. But the gardeners go out all the time. The gatherers go out all the time, said Barony. And so does Fawn. Fawn is the Queen's hunter, Wing told her, with an unusual sternness. And without her, the gatherers, we'd all starve. But they only go out when they have to. And they don't stay out longer than they have to. You and I don't have to, so there. One moment. Just adjusting something. Barony jumped up and dragged a stool over to the window, hopping up on the seat for a better view. If she looked straight out, there was nothing but leaves and branches. But if she cranked her neck and bit all the way down, she could just see. Oh, Barony, do sit down, said Wing, wearily. You're blocking all the fresh air. Barony made a face and plopped back onto her seat. a wobbly construction of twigs and dried grass, and felt though it might come to pieces any minute. "But it's hot in here," she muttered, "and so ugly." Like most of the other rooms inside the oak, the apartment she shared with Wink was plain, clumsily furnished and cramped. Not like the garden she had glimpsed through the open window. Its velvety stretch of lawn framed the shrubberies and dotted with bright flowers. That was beauty. "Why don't you go down to the kitchen?" said Wink. Said Wink distractedly, eyes fixed on the seam she was spinning. "I hear the gatherers found a bee's nest this morning. If you wipe dishes or sweep the floors a bit, they might leave you a piece of honeycomb." "I'm not hungry." Besides, Mallow was in the kitchen, and no one would dare offer Barony such sweet bargain when the chief cook was around. Except perhaps Sorrel, who was an old and kindly, more a little absent-minded, but apparently had not seen Sorrel in days. "Polish the looking glass then," said Wink. Barony picked up the full-length mirror on its carved stand. Was the most lovely object in the room. A relic from the days of magic, it had belonged to the previous seamstress, who was Barony's own egg-mother and namesake, and Barony had spent many hours in front of it, whispering secrets to her own reflection. There were no other children in the oak, so the white-haired girl in the mirror was the closest thing to a playmate she knew. She rose and stepped towards the glass, but even as she moved, the window caught her eye again. Between the branches of the great oak glowed dazzling gleams of blue sky, and the leaves whispered promises of a breeze she longed to feel. A robin alighted on a nearby twig, cocking its head at her, and Barony felt a sudden urge to dive through the window and leap on its back. Together they would soar far from the oak to a place where she too could fly free. With a flick of its wings, the robin vanished. Another chance missed that Barony, and another chance missed. Poor Barony, and frustration swelled like a wasp's nest inside her. "It's not fair," she burst out. "Why can't we go outside?" "Just because the Queen says it's not safe. How does she even know? She never leaves the oak either." Wink snatched the last pin out of her mouth, looking shocked. "Of course she does leave the oak. She's the one who keeps us all alive since the rest of us lost our magic. If it weren't for her protection, the oak would sicken and die. All sorts of horrible creatures would come and crawling inside to gobble us up. She doesn't dare go out because if anything happens to her, it'll be the end for us all." Wink's voice trembled in the last phrase, as though she could already see the disaster happening. Barony leant on the windowsill, staring out at the sky. "Still not fair," she muttered. Her words were followed by a heavy pause, and then a sigh from Wink. "I suppose you're old enough to know," she said. "I didn't like to tell you before, but—" "I already know about the Sundering," interrupted Barony, who had spent a whole afternoon dusting bookshelves to get this story from Campion, the Oak's librarian. "A long time ago, someone put a curse on everyone in the Oak, so we couldn't do magic anymore, and everybody got confused and scared, and lots of fairies died. And then Queen Amaryllis came, only she wasn't called Amaryllis yet, and she wasn't a queen, but I can't remember that part." "Her name was Alda," said Wink softly. Barony ignored the interruption, and she still had her magic because she wasn't in the oak when the Sundering happened. So she had become queen because nobody else was clever or strong enough anymore. And she made lots of different rules to try and keep people safe from the crows and foxes and things, but kept making silly mistakes and getting killed anyway. And finally she told everyone it wasn't safe to leave the oak ever. She finished the last sentence in a single breath and turned defiantly to look at Wink. See, I told you I knew. Oh yes, said Wink, flustered. Well, I suppose, except it's still a stupid rule, Barony went on hotly. Because I'm not silly and I'm not going to be killed. So there. With a flash of her wings, she hopped onto the windowsill. Barony, Wink shrieked. Get down! But Barony did not hesitate. Crouching on the window ledge, she studied the distance between herself and the nearest branch. Then, just before Wink's flailing hands could seize her, she leaped. Wings outspread, she landed neatly as a dragonfly. As she straightened up, flushed and proud, she was rewarded with a touch of summer breeze, lifting the stickly hair away from her forehead. It felt so wonderful. Barony, come back! No, wait, stay right there. I'll go get help. But no, I can't leave you. Oh, what shall I do? Wink fluttered back and forth by the open window, but she was clearly too frightened to climb out herself, which meant the Barony could count on at least a few more minutes of freedom. Eagerly, the fiery girl scrambled up the branch to its very tip. She wrapped her arms about the supple twig and hung there enraptured. Below lay the garden she had always longed to explore, the barely tamed wilderness of the rose edge on the east and a stout line of privet to the west. The flower-striped lawn in the distance, the daunting bulk of the house. There had been fairies in the oak for more than 400 years, Campion had said. That made the house a latecomer, and a rude one at that. Not only had invited it to settle here, no one had invited it to settle here, but its stony-faced blank windows and arrogantly peaked roof did not allow any question, let alone argument. Rumour said that it was full of monsters, but Barony had never seen one. Perhaps she would see a monster today. Barony, oh Barony, please, Wink entreated, but her voice was faint now and easy to ignore. Barony slid down the twig and straddled the end of the branch, kicking her bare heels. How she had borne so long, shut up in the oak like a prisoner. Her thoughts were distracted by a scuffling noise below. Barony peered over the edge of the branch to see an enormous creature with sun-browned limbs and a round, hairless face. Standing at the foot of the oak. As she watched, it leapt up the grass below his branch and began climbing the tree towards her. It must have been right underneath me the whole time, she thought with a thrill that was half delight, half terror. And now it's coming up. Should I run? Should I fly? Or should I stay here, very small and quiet, and hope it doesn't see me? The monster's hair almost as pale as her own, but yellower and cropped close to its head, exposing a pair of oddly rounded ears. Its eyes, when it lifted them upwards in search of the next branch, were as blue as wings, and despite their enormous size, there was something familiar about its features. It was a child, Barony realized, her excitement rising just like herself, a real playmate at last. Meanwhile, Wink had stopped tittering and began to lose her temper instead. Barony, if you don't come back in this oak this very minute. Shh, said Barony. You're gonna frighten it away. That stopped Wink short. Frightened? What? The monster, of course, Barony told her impatiently, without taking her attention from the child. It was only a couple of branches below her now, and although it did not appear to have seen her, it paused and tipped its head to one side as though listening. Several heartbeats passed in silence. Then she heard Wink say in a strained whisper, barely audible above the rustling of the leaves, Barony, don't. Oh, please, whatever you do, don't move. Barony had lived with Wink all her life, but she had never heard that particular note of her foster mother's voice before. Wink didn't just sound nervous or even worried, she sounded terrified. Barony's confidence wavered, and she began to wiggle backwards very cautiously towards the oak. She could hear her mother's laboured breathing as it resumed the climb. Oh, Monster's laboured breathing as it resumed the climb, and her own breath quickened as she realised how close it was now. Close enough to seize her in that crabby hand, to tear off her wings, to cram her into that red, half-open mouth. The child looked up, and his gaze met hers. The fear within Barony burst like a soap bubble. She saw astonishment in the creature's face, but no hint of malice or hunger. In fact, if she had not been assured all her life that fairies were the only real people in the world, she might have taken the alertness in those eyes for intelligence. Impulsively, Barony stretched out her hand, the other child's teeth gleaming as it pulled a level with her branch, and its huge fingers reached out towards hers. All at once, Barony felt herself seized from behind and wrenched in from the air. Throat tight with terror, she could not even squeak as her captor dragged her down the length of the branch and tossed her through the window into the oak. Barony tumbled to the dusty floor, flinging up an arm to protect herself, only to realise it was Fawn standing over her. Panting and furious, she had been rescued by the Queen's very own hunter. Fawn's dark hair was windblown, her tunic and leggings streaked with dirt, her face a scowl of concentration. She slammed the window shut and leaned against it, listening intently. Then she spun around and snapped at Barony. "You ignorant, selfish little gnat! And you, Periwinkle!" She stopped the anger fading from her face. "Wink." There was no reply. Barony turned to see Wink laying on the rug, an arm's length away. Her eyes were closed, her face was colourless. "Oh, blight," said Fawn wearily, reaching down. She hauled Barony to her feet and shoved her into the nearby chair. "Sit there. Don't move. I'll ring for the healer." "She's merely fainted," said Valerian, straightening up from the sofa where Wink lay. "I will give her some chamomile tea when she wakes, but she will need rest and quiet to recover." "Oh, she won't get much of that with this one underfoot," said Fawn, with a glance at Barony. "All right, girl. Come with me. You can explain yourself to the Queen." "That will not be necessary," said a lofty voice, and they all turned to see Bluebell, the Queen's attendant, standing in the doorway. "Her Majesty has sent me to investigate. Am I to understand that this child actually—" She paused and gave a little shudder. "Crawled out of the oak?" "Yes, and in another 2 heartbeats would have been down that human boy's gullet," said Fawn. "If there weren't so few of us already, I'd say it was no more than a silly chit deserved." "Human," said Barony, testing out the word. "But this cannot be," said Bluebell, looking alarmed. "Every morning the Queen renews her spells of protection about the oak for this very purpose, to keep the humans at bay." "It works on grown humans, no doubt," said Fawn. "But children are chancy little weasels. And speaking of, this one," she pointed at Barony, "has obviously grown too wild for Wink to manage. Someone else will have to take this brat." I shall consult with Her Majesty," said Bluebell, and Barony's stomach squirmed. What if the Queen sent her to live with someone like Fawn, or even worse, Mallow? "I'm sorry," she burst out. "Let me stay with Wink. I'll be good from now on." "You," said Fawn, whipping around to glare at her. "Shut up. The trouble you're in right now, you'll be lucky if the Queen doesn't clip your wings and make you scrub the chamber pots till you're 50. Barony's eyes grew huge. She sat back in the chair, hands clasped meekly in her lap. "Well," said Bluebell, "that seems to be a little extreme. The Queen is merciful, but clearly the child needs to be educated." "Leave her to me," said Fawn. She strode forward, seizing Barony by the elbow and yanking her to her feet. I'll put some fear into her. If you plan to beat her, began Bluebell, but Fawn cut her off. I have something better than a willow switch, she said. Believe me. With that, she pushed Barony towards the door. Panicking, Barony dug in her heels, but Fawn merely grabbed the back of her tunic and lifted her in the air. The fabric bunched up beneath her wings, and Barony kicked and twisted before marched her out the room with her undaunted. When they reached the landing, she dropped Barony back onto her feet. 6 winters ago, your egg mother wandered outside in the middle of an ice storm and froze herself to death. By the time I found her, she'd already given up the last of her magic and vanished. There was nothing left but a pile of old clothes and you. The first intact egg we'd found in Gardner knows how many years, and we all held our breaths for fear you would never hatch. Do you think the Queen a fool for making rules on a whim? You could have died out there today. He wasn't going to hurt me, Barony protested. He only wanted to play. So do cats, said Fawn, and they eat you afterwards. Now, you can walk, or I can carry you over my shoulder like a dead shrew, but either way, you're going down those stairs. What are you going to do to me? You'll see, said Fawn. Now move. With a dry mouth and leaden foot, Barony obeyed. Fawn prompted her down 2 full turns of the spiral stair to the next landing. Then across the walkway, around the curve of the hall to the unfamiliar door. There, Fawn rapped with knuckles and waited, fingers drumming on the hilt of her bone dagger. When it became clear that no one would answer, she put her shoulder to the door and shoved it open. Inside the room smelled stale, and the air was cloudy with dust. Fawn lit a lamp and carried it over to a narrow cot, heaped with blankets, where a fairy lay on her back, open-eyed and still. Look, said Fawn. Do you recognize her? Of course Barony knew who it must be, but the fatigue in her bed looked so wizened and frail, so unlike her former apple-cheeked self, that it would have been easier to believe her a stranger. Her once ageless skin had turned white as ash flakes, showing the veins beneath. Her arms and legs were gone, her scalp bore only a few clumps of greyish hair. She smelled of comfy ointment, but even more strongly of decay. And Barony stumbled back from the bed, clapping her hands to her mouth. That's right, said Fawn. It's Sorrel. She used to slip you treats from the kitchen, didn't she? When Mallow wasn't looking. She wasn't even that old, you know. Only 190. What happened to her? We call it the silence. Fawn drew the blankets up over Sorrel again. First you become short-tempered, sometimes even violent. Then you get confused and babble nonsense. Soon you're too weak to move, too cold for any fire to warm. Finally you end up like this. She gestured to the figure in the bed. Not moving, not responding. You lose your hearing, your sight, your every sense, your feeling. Eventually you just fade away. Barony swallowed. But I thought we didn't get sick. So did the rest of us, said Fawn. Until this started happening. Did you never wonder why there were so few of us, I suppose? Not an empty oak is still all you've ever known. But when I was your age, there were twice as many of us. And that was even after things got so bad the Queen had to order everyone to stay inside. Barony's head swam. She closed her eyes, trying to shut out the image of Sorrel's wasted body. You mean they all died like this? Great Gardener, no, said Fawn. But even a few is too many. It was bad enough when when we only had to worry about fairies doing foolish things outside of doors. Oh. Sorry about that. It was bad enough when we only had to worry about fairies doing foolish things outside of doors and getting themselves killed. No often than not, their eggs got smashed or eaten by crows before we could find them. But when the silence takes a fairy, it's even worse, because then there's no egg at all. Nausea overwhelmed Barony. I never knew. Of course you didn't, said Fawn flatly, because Wink didn't want to give you nightmares. I always did say that one was too soft-hearted. But Barony was still struggling to understand. Where does the silence come from? Ah, that's the question, said Fawn. Nobody knows, not even the Queen. But I've seen this happen a few times now. And you know what I think? She beckoned Barony closer, bent over and hissed in her ear. It's the humans. Shocked, Barony jerked away. Got your attention now, haven't I? Fawn said. Think about it. The house was built just over 100 years ago, and the silence came not long after. Do you really think that's just a coincidence? She was right, Barony realized, looking down at her own hands in horror. She had reached out to the human child, the boy. What would have happened if she touched him? There are only 46 of us left now, said Fawn. Fawn pressed on, and with those humans right on our doorstep, staying in the oak is our best hope of staying alive. So, if you don't want to end up in the same nutshell as Sorrel. Barony could bear it no longer. She whirled, stumbling on the rug, and rushed from the room as fast as her legs would carry her. She dashed back up the spiral stair. She tried to think of her toys, her bugs, Wink's mirror, anything but the terrible thing Fawn had shown her. She flung herself through Wink's door and coiled with someone. Through Wink's door and collided with someone tall. Staggering back, she looked up into the austere face and grave grey eyes of Valerian. And with that, Barony burst into tears. You needn't worry about the child now, said Fawn's voice from behind her, as Bluebell clucked reproachfully from Valerian's stocked ear and stroked Barony's hair. She won't do it again. And with that, my cosmic star bits, we come to the close of Chapter 1 of Knife by R.J.Anderson. Again, I am completely new at doing ASMR, and this is a completely new setup I'm trying to do. So please excuse me for any face rigging malfunctions, any weird like twitches or something you may see. I am doing my very, very best. So, I do hope, as you all say, that you do very much enjoy my voice, that you very much enjoyed me attempting ASMR, and that you're happy that Momma Minty read you another bedtime story. I will be continuing this series with aims to try and get through the entirety of at least this book, if not the entire 3-book series. For now though, my wonderful cosmic star bits, I hope you all have a fantastic night, a wonderful evening, and Momma Minty wishes you